Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by Jay Turner and Mitch Radhuber, co-founders of Fince. In this episode, we'll be discussing Jay and Mitch's insights on how we change the way we think about money and financial guidance. Jay and Mitch, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, hey Tony, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, excited for the conversation. So, to get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are your origin stories?
Yeah, this is Jay here. I'm from the Atlanta area. I studied business at the University of South Carolina, and my professional background has been mainly in business operations and supply chain. But along the way, I've just always been a personal finance nerd in some capacity, whether that's reading different books or just going down rabbit holes and with different articles. So that led to me doing some volunteer work for Junior Achievement, which basically just teaches middle and high school age students the basics of personal finance. But that combined with my personal experiences have led to the creation of Fince, which is what we're here to talk about today.
Awesome.
Cool, yeah. So I'm Mitch. I grew up originally in the New York area, and growing up, I always wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to build things for people, and studied engineering in college. Ended up sort of by happenstance working in finance after college with an engineering degree, working as a software engineer. And that got me kind of interested in how you can apply technology to finance, to the finance industry. But I figured, rather than working at a massive organization doing that, I could really make better use of my kind of time and talent applying technology to individuals and how individuals can sort of manage their personal finances. And so I'm the CTO and co-founder of Fince, and I'm working alongside Jay on Fince. Yeah.
Awesome. So, neither one of you started in the world of money. What drew you into the world of money?
I would say we have so many questions around personal finance, right? It affects us all in some way. We have our own experiences, we have our own goals with it. But specifically, I would say for us and millions of other young people, after we graduated college, we wanted to answer those questions. And it was a hard experience and a tough and frustrating experience to try and get that help. And a lot of the things that we needed help with were outside of the spreadsheet, like behavioral change and mindset and decision making and things like that. So I would say that's kind of what drew us in to even, start or think of starting something like Fince.
Awesome. How about you, Mitch?
Yeah. I mean, so I was first exposed to it, as I said, with my first job. But one thing that I found interesting is, so my fiance has two younger twin sisters, and when they're a few years younger than us, they graduated college, and they're always calling me, asking, how do I open my first credit card, or where should I, what kind of savings account should I create? And I guess they're asking me because I work in finance at the time, but I'm not a financial expert. I'm really not the one to be asking about this. And I saw this a lot with other friends and family. And I myself struggled with, student loans after college, with budgeting and living in New York City for the first time, living on my own for the first time. Right. So that sort of piqued my interest in okay, this seems to be a problem. How can we build something to kind of solve it for ourselves and our friends first, and really see how that's important to other people and could really benefit other people as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. And thinking back to my college years I struggled with credit card debt because, got my first credit card in college and it was like, this is awesome. It's like free money.
Yeah.
not so much. There was some pain down the road for me. So, it's definitely an issue for graduating college students and graduating high school students who go straight into the workforce. So, you discovered the issue. So what was the next step? What inspired you to start Fince?
I would say it's those pain points that we just talked about. Everyone has their thing that's special to them that kind of makes them stop for a minute and say, okay, maybe I need to readdress my relationship with money. For me personally, it was after college, just having some personal family stuff where you're kind of dependent on to make certain decisions. You're dependent on to kind of have your finances in order for other people, whether that's for your parents in some circumstances, or it could be for your future family, right? So making sure that you can get an easy or have an easy, simple way to access that answer is something that really inspired us to create Fince and have an easy way for people to get the guidance that they need.
Yeah, absolutely would echo that. I think one of the huge motivators and sort of like missions and goals that we have is that ease of access for everyone. Like it should be super accessible and easy as it is today on your phone to order food or a car or someone to come put together your IKEA dresser, right? Whatever it is. Why is that so easy? But getting really kind of foundational, like fundamental, basic personal financial help is not easy. So we saw that as a problem, and that's what we are trying to solve with Fince.
That's awesome. And I completely agree with you. It's mind-boggling that it's not easier. And I think the traditional financial services industry keeps making it challenging, which kind of leads into the next question is what do you both feel was lacking within the traditional financial advisory industry?
Yeah, great question. I would say a lot of transparency was lacking. There are different places you can go. There are different tools you can use. There's a bunch of information out there. But truly making it marketplace style, like you see with tools that we commonly use every day, like Uber, Airbnb, right? You can get on a platform, get on an app or whatever, and you can book a room in a stranger's house, across the country in minutes, right? But you wouldn't do that unless you have the transparency and trust there. So that's what we felt was lacking, and that's what we wanted to make sure was a key part of Fince as we built it out.
Yeah, and the traditional advisory industry more so is focused on, or oftentimes focused on, higher net worth individuals as well, and managing a portfolio of investments and taking a percentage, like whatever it is, 1% fee on that, right? So a lot of especially younger people, but not necessarily, but anyone that doesn't meet that sort of high net worth threshold is often met with kind of a gap in access to financial help. So it's that and eliminating that barrier, as well as kind of what Jay's saying, and making it super easy. If it's easier, there's less pain and friction in the process. People are more likely to get the help that they need. So
That's awesome. Well, I think that's exactly one of the biggest Achilles heels that I've seen. And I know so many financial planners who started their own firms and their goal is to serve everybody and to have no minimums on assets under management or maybe a $25,000, very minimal. But then as their client base grows, they can only service so many clients. So I think it is
All right.
an issue that needs to be also solved by technology because advisors, they'll have 50 to 150 clients, and that's the max that they can service. And so, of course, their minimums go up because, they want to, have some kind of barrier to taking on new clients. And to maximize their profits, at the end of the day. So, tell us a little bit more. How does Fince work? What does the platform do?
Yeah, so at its core, Fince is a marketplace for you to find and book sessions with a financial coach. But we also have other specialists like financial counselors and financial therapists which financial therapy in itself is kind of a newer field that people are learning about, but it's really special in how people can connect and learn about themselves and their financial journey. But Fince it should be the easiest way for you to do that. So whether that's you, having conversations with your spouse about money, or trying to, track your goals for future spending, whatever it may be, you can do that on the Fince and talk to somebody, but also you can, use different tools to see how you're doing with the progress in your financial journey as well.
Awesome. Mitch, you want to throw in anything there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right. So if you imagine kind of Airbnb or kind of these apps and platforms that we see with other services, as I kind of was saying, it's that, but you have financial coaches. You can find a coach that is maybe specialized to the type of problems or questions that you have. Immediately book a live video one-on-one session with them. And then we also have tools, built around that to make that interaction as easy as possible. Going into your first session, what kind of questions, how should you prepare, follow-ups from a session, etc., things like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, one of the things that Jay, I know you and I talked about offline is personalization. Why is personalization so important in the money world?
Absolutely. It's probably the most important thing, right? Just because we can get kind of a generalized answer on social media, we can get it through, something on Google, but tools and content only go so far if it's not personalized for you. Just because we all have our own situations. So if you don't get that, then you might end up making a decision based on information that could have been for somebody else. So personalization is key if you're actually looking to take the next step in your financial journey, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and if you think about why no two people are the same, and therefore personalization is important. There are just so many factors and variables that impact kind of your unique financial circumstance. So that could be quantitative things like, your income and expenses and investments and etc., as well as goals that you have, or maybe how you were raised in your background and your lived experience with money. And so if you combine all of those variables, it's like there's so many possible permutations and combinations, and everyone's different. So getting non-generic, personalized advice based on that is super important. Just one thing I want to add that I think is interesting, that I recently wrote a short kind of blog about this actually, but there's this stat that I like to compare to finance here, which is in school tutoring, students who get one-on-one tutoring perform better than 98 out of 100 students who don't get one-on-one tutoring, who are in just a general classroom setting. So if you think about, like, that's insanely like impactful, getting that personalized tutoring in school. I think that in a lot of ways applies to money. So just something I kind of internalize and like to think about.
Yeah, that's a really interesting analogy, and I think it's something that actually, we were talking a little bit about pre-show, is that so many of these financial literacy platforms are just a series of videos that really aren't geared towards anyone. The way I explained it to people, it's like you go in to see your doctor, and they don't just say, "Hey, watch a video on knee replacement surgery," if you're in there for a headache. They'll take the time and go through with you and say, "Okay, well, what's going on?" And as you point out, Mitch, I think something that gets overlooked is background and personal history, and that has such a huge impact. How we grow up around money, how our parents work with money. Sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's socioeconomic, sometimes it's religious. We have a certain belief about money that's tied into our religion, and that's going to play a major factor in all of the different financial decisions that we make. So I think that's wonderful that you guys are including. I know you include behaviors and things like that. And I love the financial therapy as part of it. I think, Jay, if I recall correctly, Rakim Sabri is affiliated with the platform. And for people who aren't familiar with Rakim Sabri, You've probably actually heard me talk about him on this podcast, and so shout out to him and check
Absolutely.
out the work he's doing. If you really want to learn about what financial therapy is and financial trauma, check out the work that Rakim Sabri is doing. So
Absolutely.
sorry,
He's been
just putting a
awesome.
quick shout out to him.
Yeah, no, he's been awesome and really helpful to us. When we first connected, just the idea of financial trauma hadn't crossed my mind, right? It's a field that he's become a thought leader in, but it's something that we should really all think about because we may not internalize something as trauma, but we do have experiences that have shaped and molded us along the way, and really kind of dictate how we spend and save and invest day to day. So it's something that you should definitely um, look at it and research.
Definitely, definitely. So let's pivot into the get ready questions. So the first one is, what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
Oh man, I think this is probably something people already know. It's just harder to actually implement. And that's spend less than you make and spend it on things that you actually want, right? I think we all get caught up in maybe what our friends are doing or what we see online or whatever. And if we actually took a moment and thought, like, do we actually want to spend money on this, or is it something that's actually meaningful for us? Then I think that could, really help. And I think a lot of people already know it, but can probably, work on it, work on implementing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds simple, but I know it's in practice, not the easiest thing to kind of follow. So, yeah. And so I'll speak from my experience. Obviously, I'm not a financial expert, but what's worked for me is, if you have money, you'll probably spend it. If you have extra money sitting around, it's much easier to spend it than if you pay yourself first and set up some automatic, transfer from your checking to savings, same date, same amount every month. That was unbelievably helpful for me, even though I was aware that this existed and is a sort of common piece of advice. I wasn't doing it. As soon as I did it, I was able to save a lot more because naturally, I think people, if you have that extra money sitting around, okay, it feels like it's there to be spent, and so it's kind of it's a mental thing, but it's surprisingly helpful.
Yeah, well, those are great tips, and I completely agree. It's just, it's being intentional, but I think, Mitch, what you said is really the way people should think about their cash flow is, they tend to save at the very end, like, oh, well, I have some money left over. I'll put that into my savings account instead of, doing that first. And then, Jay, as you point out, being intentional with what's left over is you can buy anything you want. It's just you can't buy everything you want. And I
Yeah.
think that's a difference for people. But, if you combine what the two you said, do your savings first. And then when you have money left over is, go ahead. If you want to go out to eat or do whatever it is, if you want to get the new Jordans, go for it. Nothing wrong with any of those things. And for the women, if you want to get Jordans, probably not, but
Yeah.
I can't remember all the fancy women's shoes. That could make another show.
They got some nice women's Jordans
Yeah.
out there as well. So
That's true. That's a good point. We could do another podcast on Jordans,
For sure.
on the economics of Jordans. So talk about a big business, but that's a whole other subject. So the next get ready question is, what's one simple thing you can do each year to set yourself up for financial success?
Probably biased here, but I would say talk to a financial coach or somebody that can help you, set or get your finances in order so that you can track your goals the right way, that you have, the right mindset around your money and things like that. I mean, so much happens over the course of a week or a month, let alone a year, right? So talking to somebody to align your financial habits and goals is super important, just like you would go to a doctor or go to a dentist every 6 months or a year, right? It's just as important because it still affects you day to day. So I'll say that's the number one thing.
yeah, and sort of related, but whether it's through a coach or not, just kind of putting in that work up front of taking inventory of your income and expenses or the goals you have for the year, or, any larger, maybe one-off things that you have planned for the year. Just kind of sitting down, coming up with a rough plan based on that, for me at least, has been extremely, extremely helpful. And so once you have that plan and you kind of like sort of pay yourself upfront, if you will, you don't have to think and stress as much about money throughout the year. You don't have to be kind of worried or thinking about that every day. You can trust that you have a plan. Okay, I have a plan. I know it's gonna work based on the way I set it up. I can kind of be patient and just trust that. And I think sitting down to do that at least every year. And as Jay said, it's obviously that things change throughout the year, so it's dynamic, and maybe you want to revisit it more than once a year. But I think doing that's really important, just to how then you kind of approach money and think about, or ideally don't think as much about money throughout the rest of the year.
That's awesome. I love this advice, is because, you both talked about focusing on goals as a big part of it. Is I think sometimes people get so caught up in the minutia of their money life rather than just backing up, as you both point out, and looking at the big picture and seeing how everything's working. And that's what I urge people to do, is don't think about the financial product and service first. Think about your goal, and then think about whether something serves that greater purpose. And it serves the big picture. And, Mitch, as you point out, this is all dynamic. You have to go back and revisit it. You can't just buy a financial service product and let it sit there. It's always changing. So that's awesome advice. So what is one habit that people can change when it comes to their money?
I think one habit that could really enhance a lot of people's personal finances, this one's hard, but it's doable. And I would say estimate future spending. And now, I mean, there are obviously unexpected things that come up throughout the week or month or year, but gifts, holidays, your car maintenance, weddings, other events, right? Like, we know about some of these things, but still they just creep up on us like we never knew about them. And we're like, oh, okay, there's $200 there. Oh, there's $1,000 there, right? So if we could somehow factor these in to our like we were talking about, our goals, right? Like, a lot of these things can start sidetracking and putting those things on the back burner. But if we can somehow factor these expenses that are coming up that are somewhat planned, I think that could help a lot.
Yeah. I think something that people can kind of get into the habit of doing, which is a negative kind of pattern, is scrolling on, say, like TikTok or social media, and taking this financial advice that they see on these social platforms kind of at face value. I see this with my friends, with younger people, with my parents even. And this, and Jay was talking about this earlier as well, but that is, I know it's interesting and catchy and entertaining, that's why it's there, but it's generic advice, should absolutely be taken with a grain of salt. Everyone has a super unique situation, and I think it can be good in some ways that you're thinking about money when you see these financial influencers or whatever you want to call them. You're thinking about money, but it's not one size fits all. You want to ideally see how that applies to your personal situation rather than just taking that at face value. So hopefully people don't, or try to avoid forming a habit of that and kind of getting into that generic social media advice.
That is awesome. I think that's a huge issue for people, is the social media advice and unfortunately, a lot of it comes from people who really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other huge issue. One, it's generic, so it doesn't really help you for the most part. And the other part is some of it is not great advice, partially for that reason, is it doesn't necessarily fit somebody, but it's also somebody who may not know much more than you do about a particular topic. So
absolutely. And then maybe they're trying to sell you something or whatever, that who knows, right? Who knows what the case is?
Yeah,
and
you nailed it.
Yeah. I just want to share a stat that I read. There was a study last year. I think they surveyed like 1,000 people between the ages of 18 and 26. And those people said 75% or so of those people get advice, financial advice from TikTok or YouTube. And I think it was 85% or something said they get some misleading form of advice from social media. So if you put that in perspective, like that, I mean, it could be a really scary problem at scale. It's like, we really don't want that. So, what's part of what we're trying to do with Fince is move people away from that to more accredited sources, real, financial coaches to kind of help mitigate that potential issue. So.
Yeah, I saw a study on that. And Mitch, if you don't mind sharing the link to that study, I can include it in the show notes for people watching and listening.
Yeah.
But I think, that's really hitting the nail on the head is that, yeah, some of this advice, is going to get you in trouble. But part of the problem is a lot of people are experts are prohibited from talking on social media. So sometimes there's not even the opportunity for a rebuttal from somebody who's actually qualified to say something. So,
and to that point, there are a lot of things that are somewhat boring in personal finance, right? So a lot of financial influencers out there, whatever you want to call them, have to make it somewhat enticing, right? They have to get your attention, and the content that's there isn't that enticing. So like they have to have some kind of hook there, and once it hooks you in, it may not be accurate at all. But like Mitch was saying, having a actual accredited source that you can go to is probably the best option.
Definitely. Yeah, it's money. If I spend as much time thinking about it as you do, maybe buying your next phone or whatever purchase you're going to make. I mean, that's the other thing I'd recommend to people is put a little time into thinking about it. So the next question is, what money myth are you trying to break?
I would say it's probably that you can DIY yourself to achieving all your financial goals. Like we were saying before, the tools and content have been out there for, some time now. We all need help in some kind of way. Like Mitch and I aren't the financial experts, right? So as we approach different phases of our financial journey, we need help in some way. Like for me early on, it was not falling victim to trying to do stock picking. Like that just wasn't probably the smartest way for me to introduce myself to personal finance. But we, all have different things that we fall victim to or that are our weaknesses. And I think that if we lean on more people that are accredited and that can help, I think that's probably something that'll help us in the long term.
Yeah, honestly, and Jay, I think one piece of that too is like some people try to DIY it, but probably a huge chunk of people are kind of intimidated by the entire process, or maybe it's not the most fun thing maybe to go through your expenses, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's such a I think people don't want to go do it themselves, but maybe they don't know where to go to get the help. So it's like, where exactly people maybe just want to find someone who can guide them through it. And at least I know I do. And I think that's a really helpful thing. But Tony, to the question, I think one other myth that I got this actually from the coach that I work with is that the myth is you have to be really tight with your money and to be really responsible. And all of your small day-to-day expenses you need to cut back, because that's how you save responsibly, and that's the only way you'll meet your goals. I think that's absolutely not true. I think it's super important to allow yourself, some of those things that you really enjoy in life, and like allow yourself to live, or have these certain quality of life things, whether it's get your favorite $5 coffee every morning, or whatever it is for someone. I think that's an important thing to allow yourself and kind of bake that into your plan when you do create a plan, and it's okay to spend on those things that you enjoy.
I love my Starbucks cappuccinos, and they're definitely not a good buy, but, a couple of days a week, and that's exactly it. Don't deny yourself things that bring you joy. It's just, and you both mentioned this earlier, it's just put it in perspective, it's just, be intentional, just don't have everything all at once. You may not be able to have Starbucks coffee and go out to a fancy dinner and take in a concert on the same night every night, but once a month, if you want to save up for a big show, do it. Nothing wrong with it. So
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
because I think that's awesome advice, because so many people come in and it's like, they get to extreme fire, financial independence, retire early. And it's like, hey, I got to save everything and I can't do anything, and I had one woman. So for viewers and listeners, you can go back and hear my conversation with Prudence Zoo. And she talked about it, they did extreme fire, her and her husband, for like 15 years, and they accumulated the money. But she said it was miserable looking back on it, and she'd never do it again, because they denied everything that brought them joy for 15 years so that they could get their nest egg put aside, and they were miserable for it. So I love this advice. So let's get out the time machine here. What advice would you give your younger selves if you go back in time, knowing what you know now, money, like thinking about, your college years, with both of you as, somewhat recent college graduates, but, what would you tell your college graduate self?
Invest simply and sooner. Don't get caught up in, like I was saying before, stock picking in your early 20s. Like, unless you spent 10 to 15 years, thinking about that, doing that, researching it, that's probably not the best, course of action that early in your financial journey. So yeah, and investing sooner, just because over time, I mean, the way that money compounds is amazing, right? Just looking at the growth over time and looking at where your returns could be if you invested 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So that's something that really has stuck with me. And if I was gonna go back, I don't know, 10 years, that's probably be the main thing that I focus on.
Yeah, I think I would tell myself, pay attention to your personal finances sooner. I totally did not do that, and for years really like had no idea where my money was going. So pay attention to that sooner, work with a financial coach sooner to like form a plan and at least be aware of where your money is going, for starters. Um, and I guess I'd say this relates to what Jay said too, and this is a cliche that there's some truth to. It's like, the best time to start being serious about your personal finances or start investing is 10 years ago, or when you first had the chance to, but next best time is today. So that's probably where I would go with it.
Awesome advice. And Jay, you hit on pretty much what everybody says on this podcast, which I love, is compound interest. And that concept, and for viewers and listeners of the show, there's a whole episode where I had on 4 guests, and that's all we talked about was compound interest and the magic of compound interest. So it's, I agree with you. I think that's one of the most important concepts. And, Mitch, as you point out, is be aware of where your money is going. Think about these things. This is so important. Start early, but if you can't, starting today is the best day to start, So don't worry about it, because I know I have some viewers and listeners who are definitely a little more mature in their life journey. And, you can still start today,
Yeah.
it's a good day to start. So, wrap up, what are your number one tips on changing the way we think about money?
There was a quote a couple of years ago that I heard from Scott Galloway. He was talking about his own personal finances. And he just talks about a lot of the personal finances of young people overall. And he said, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. And I think that if we start to really internalize that and stop thinking about what other people may be doing or try to pack everything in into a week or a month or a certain phase of life, we can really start to, one, become more grateful for where we are and where we could be, but also just have more time to reflect on, like we were talking about earlier, our goals and being intentional and things like that. So just recognizing that, you can have it all one day. It just may come, at different phases in life, and just be comfortable with that.
Again, that's one of the dangers, I think, of social media too, is you see people flaunting having it all, and it's like, how do I get rich quick, or how do I get to that point now? But I think that's interesting, Jay. But I'd say the tip that I would give is to just be prepared and have a plan. And ultimately, our goal is to, if you have a plan, you have the freedom to sort of release the reins, right? And not have to think about money as much. And ultimately, that's the goal, is you want to be able to live the lifestyle you want without constantly worrying and stressing and thinking about money, without money being that sort of controlling force in your life. So I think the best way to do that is to have a plan and trust it and revisit it, but just to be prepared with the plan. And then, for me, that's at least helped me be much, much more at peace sort of with where my money's at, and kind of, trust that I have this plan in place, and not have to worry every day about money.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that gets back to what you were talking about earlier with goals is, if you have a plan, you work your plan, you can stick to it. It's like,
Yeah.
going grocery shopping is, they say, don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry, and go with a list, because how often, if you walked into a grocery store and you wind up with a bunch of stuff, because like, ooh, that sounds good. And then all of a sudden, like, especially Costco, I was reading an article about Costco where it's like intentional, like all the stuff you really want, like toilet paper, paper towels, all that stuff is in the back in every single warehouse. And that's intentional. So you have to walk through and look at all this other stuff. Because I don't know about both of you, if you guys go to Costco, but whenever we go to Costco, it's like, man, I didn't plan on buying that stuff, and like, why is it $400? Like,
There's absolutely a science to it, I think. Yeah. And it's where they put it on the shelf, and what color it is, and the temperature of the, it's interesting, but absolutely true.
And all the high ticket items right there in the front, all the electronics and the TVs, the headphones, all that stuff, like right there as soon as you walk in. Show your card. Here's the highest ticket items you can get.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, so for viewers and listeners, I'm going to try to find the Costco article and throw a link into that, because it's fascinating. But yeah, as you point out, Jay, is like, that's all intentional with those big ticket items, like right there. And that's why, like, if you go into any Costco, the floor layout is pretty much the same, and then you have to hunt for a lot of the stuff you want to buy. Is like, it changes locations and stuff like that. Except the stuff you really want is always going to be in the back.
Necessities in the back. Yep.
So it's like, awesome. Well, thank you both very much, for your time. So to wrap up, forgot to ask, where can people learn more about each of you, connect with you, and to learn more about Fince?
Yeah, so joinfince.com is where you can find the site and book a session or a free consultation with the coach. Our social handles are Join Fince, Fince, Join Fince. I occasionally write about money and things I find interesting on a blog called Follow the Money. And Mitch, if you want to shout yours out as well.
Yep. You can find me on Substack. I think Tony will put the link in the description as well. But I write about money, and sometimes the intersection of technology and money.
What's your favorite social media channels? Can people follow you, either of you, on social media?
Yeah, my social, I'm not very active on social, but you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Jay Turner, and also on Instagram as well. That's just a personal page, but a lot of the content for personal finance you can find on the Join Fince page.
Okay, cool. Mitch, you active anywhere?
Yeah, for anyone interested, I post on, I guess, X or Twitter, sometimes about money, sometimes about tech, at M Radhuber. So you can find and connect with me there.
Cool. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, I'll include links to Jay and Mitch's blogs and social media outlets. And yeah, check out Join Fince to learn more. And thank you both, Jay and Mitch, for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Thanks for having us, Tony.
Thanks so much for having us on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. This was a great conversation. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and tell a friend. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.